So some of those things include what to award at the middle school, high school, because we have hard numbers for what's been proposed there, and also the extent of scope that we continue on with for Prospect Hill. At the middle school, high school, we've got a number that's about $4.5 million for I guess we're kind of looking at two projects there. We're looking at the interior renovation projects, and we're looking at the exterior roofing and masonry repair projects. Each of those is about $2 million plus a little bit. So I think we need to discuss what interior projects we want to go forward with at this time, and also if we want to address the masonry at this time as well. The interior projects, we have a couple other things in play. As you all know, we have the house that we're starting to renovate, so there's opportunity for some of the administrators to move to that location, but not everyone will fit there. So we need to keep other offices for administrators somewhere, and if they're not in the school here, we're renting for them as well. So we're kind of balancing the cost to do renovations here to turn things into classrooms, which will ultimately displace the administrators, and we'll have to find new office space for them. So if there's a way of staging this, it's something we can talk about. Maybe there's a benefit to sequencing the timing of the renovations at the middle school, high school. And then at Prospect Hill, I think the other thing what we need to consider is the number that we have here in the budget is almost $4 million, and our original, or the estimate that we're carrying is almost $4 million, and our base number from the budget back in May of 2018 was $2.3 million. And this represents a fairly different scope from where we are today. I think one of the things that happened with Prospect Hill is we saw an opportunity to potentially add additional space in the expansion of the entry to include ADA accessibility, and it was hard not to go forward with that as a starting point. It seemed like we thought maybe we could make it work, but I think we need to think hard about what we are specifically requiring at Prospect Hill and making sure that we're providing that there. We do need to provide ADA access and ADA accessibility toilets. So those are really the two main selling points that we had in the bond for upgrading. So that means going back to the architects and talking about some of those initial designs that we had way back in May, because it grew pretty quickly right after that, I think.
And just the security entrance as well, right?
Right, the security entrance is part of that ADA, sorry, thank you. So I'm not sure if I talked through that very clearly, but I think we have one point that we can move on, which is whether or not the board is willing to, or will take the recommendation of the committee to reject these bids and go back out under Wick's law. And there might be some discussion about that. If people have questions, we can talk about what that means. And then that's one chunk of it, but then I think we have other things to talk about and how we structure our bids for Prospect Hill when it comes time to do that, and also if we want to, what we want to do with middle school, high school. We've talked to the bidders and believe they're going to be willing to hold the numbers for a little while. So we're hoping that they'll hold the numbers until January when we could get bids back from Hutchinson.
That was, you do such a great job of summarizing the meetings. That's the only piece that I was going to add. And I think Kevin can speak more specifically to this, that we believe the bidders are on the middle school, high school are willing to keep those bids open until we can rebid Hutchinson, get those bids back, and then be able to sit as a committee and as a board holistically and look at and make those final decisions.
Right, I think that'll be a decision that we want to be able to make.
Yeah, Kevin, is that correct as far as?
Yeah, that's correct. We confirmed with all the contractors, low bidders, and they all agreed that they would hold their bid open until February 1. And that will hopefully give us enough time to make some future decisions.
Thank you. And I know our tentative timeline that we've talked about, and I'm sure Russ may speak to this, or Kevin as well, we're looking at trying to get the rebid out, assuming the board moves forward in this direction tonight, rejects the bids. We're hoping to get the new bids out December 12th. New bid out on the street and back beginning of January, so that we can have the opportunity to assess that to make recommendations to award by the end of January.
Right.
Which again, would be, the timeline should give us the opportunity to look holistically at everything.
So, there's another item, maybe you mentioned, I missed it. We're also under on the Prop 2.
No, I didn't get there. That's a
Ah.
good point.
I jumped in too soon.
It's okay. We're under on the Prop 2 bidding and costs by at least $1 million. In theory, that money can be moved over into Prop 1, but it requires public approval by referendum. So I think we're going to need that money.
Yeah.
If we haven't spent it in the fields, we should ask the voters to move that into the Hutchinson School, Prop 1, all the projects. But all of those things together, if we're successful, as Justice said, getting $3.5 to $4 million out of the rebid, we're still in a hole by quite a bit. So we're probably gonna have to do a little bit of everything to get where we need to be. So that's gonna include reducing the scope at Prospect. It's gonna include reducing the scope at the at the high school in terms of the roof, stone, and interior renovations. And other things that we can come up with. So it's a pretty big hole to fill. And I don't wanna be negative about it, but I think we need to be realistic about it. And one thing I will say, that it's great that they're willing to hold the bids, but if we need to change the scope, we're not gonna be able to use those bids. So we're gonna have to rebid that work, because it's gonna now be different. And under Wixlaw, you have to do that. So it's nice that they're gonna hold it, but my guess is by then, it's gonna be hard to take, unless we decide to take all the interior renovations and none of
Right.
the roof and masonry work, or all the roof and masonry work and none of the interior renovations. I don't think we're gonna have a lot of flexibility there. Some, because they're different contracts, and some we could not take that contract, but taking another contract. So there's some flexibility, but not as much as we,
And I think the important thing is that we're really not gonna know until the new bids come back from the 6 primes as opposed to 1. We're not gonna know how much that number needs to be.
Exactly,
Right.
correct.
Which is why it's important that we'll be able to have all these open and look at them in January, but then we still will need to make some decisions from there.
Yeah, I mean, if we're spectacularly successful in this rebidding effort, then having them hold their contracts will have been a brilliant move.
Yeah.
So,
We
But I
can hope.
assume they understand, Kevin, that this is not a guarantee. Holding the bids until February 1st is not a guarantee.
Yeah, so that's obviously something that they're concerned about.
Sure.
Basically because what happens is that wraps up their bonding for a period of time. And so essentially, some of these contractors may not bid other projects, waiting on a response in anticipation of getting a project. So there might be some sour grapes, but I still think they'll bid the other projects if they come up again. So it'll be short-lived.
sour grapes,
Yeah.
good to know.
I have a question. When we first heard about the PLA, I believe it was presented to us as something that was going to lead to efficiencies and less expensive overall. And now we're changing that direction. So I just want to understand, did we learn something new, or did PLAs change, or?
We're gonna let Russ speak.
Russ can talk about that one, I guess.
We learned something new. It was the consultant who said it would save money. The project was budgeted as a straight Wixlaw project, but, the sort of attractiveness of having a single prime contractor, we thought would draw more attention to the project, and it did. You had an excellent response from general contractors, good ones. So it did that, but it didn't seem to save money. And I know that some may think that the rebid estimates are aggressive, but if you actually take the low alternate and the low GC and the low sub prices, that's where we get to that 3 to 4 million number. So those are real numbers on people's sheets. Now, will they rebid at those numbers? You don't know that. But we also did hear that, for example, on the demo, very few asbestos contractors could deal with the PLA. There was very limited numbers for that trade, which drove that portion of the price up. We also heard on a lot of other specialty items that the general contractor had to install them because the normal installers for things like acoustic panels and gym equipment and casework couldn't deal with the PLA. So we did feel that we learned, after talking to the bidders, that most likely that PLA cost a lot of money rather than saving any money. So it's really hard to tell absent rebid.
Russ, could you speak to some of the other drivers that you think may have caused it to come in higher than expected?
Yeah, well, first of all, we share your view of the seriousness of this. All the other bids were at or under budget. So we were stunned by this, and we're trying to figure out what happened. But there's a lot going on in the construction industry. We've done a division by division comparison to estimates for both low bidders, and a few things have jumped out, starting with steel, which is about 30% above estimates, I think, from both estimators and both contractors. You can read online that tariffs have made domestic steel jump 48%. Maybe that's what you're seeing. Maybe it's just fear of that, or maybe it's just that people are so busy. But when a major trade jumps like that, and that's about $1 million right there. And it can be with markups, it can be even more. And I would point out that steel is also in concrete, which is the other number that we saw crazy high. And frankly, no professional I've known has any explanation, but the concrete almost bid at $800 a yard, which is crazy. Most estimators had it at $350 to $450 a yard in place. So we don't know what's going to happen on a rebid. Part of the thinking there was that the industry's at capacity. It's a sizable job, and there just wasn't that many people available to do it. But it is really challenging to figure out. I do think you're going to need every technique we can come up with. And we've given you a rebid value engineering list that was worked on very hard over the last 48 hours because we only have about another 12 hours to decide what we need to redesign to get this out next Thursday. So we're completely on board to do everything possible. I do have a little update on Prospect Hill, not that it matters, but the engineering has been approved and the architecture has been reviewed. So this morning it went up on the SED website as addendum required. We're trying to get the comments because they didn't seem to have sent them to us. But somebody's done something with Prospect Hill, so it's a lot closer than we thought just a few days ago.
Just one question. I believe it's the consultant's job to say that it's less expensive, otherwise the state won't approve the PLA, is that correct?
Yeah, there's got to be
Demonstrated cost savings.
a demonstrated cost savings. That's the purpose of this study, or else it's not really permissible to do them.
Russ, I'm glad you brought up the value engineering list, and this is to your point before, John, and that this is all gonna have to come from a lot of different places. So, really appreciate the work that you guys put in on this, because I think that it's, a lot more detail than we talked about at bond steering, and there are definitely some big numbers here, so can I ask a couple of specific?
Yep, and just a little
Value engineering
background, that
questions?
involved our cost estimator, lighting designer, interior designer, site engineer, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural engineer. The whole team worked on that. We got actual manufacturer's pricing on the lighting, that's the reduction number that you see in there. So a lot of work in the last 48
Right,
hours
so
on
you
that.
answered half of my question. So, great,
It was a big
good, that's exactly what we're hoping for, because there are a couple of big numbers that jump out,
Yep,
obviously, really quickly.
we think we
lighting
found
being
some big things. I'm not sure
Yeah.
you want to do them all, but.
So question on the casework, right? Because that's obviously a big number as well, too. Realize there could be some cost savings to doing it under a state contract, but that's not going to be a pure savings number, right?
No, that's more of a pay me now or pay me later thing.
Yeah.
And it's also to give you flexibility and get this building in the ground.
Mhm.
And I would also point out that you have almost a $3.8 million contingency in Prop 1. And, casework is something that could be scaled back, and it could be bought on state contract, and you don't need to buy it now. You don't have a building to put it in. So that was the thinking with the casework and the acoustic panels, basically. It's a deferment to have more information on what you have available to spend. You could open the building without acoustic panels. You'd have a couple loud rooms. You probably don't want to open the building with no casework, but you could open the building with a lot less casework.
Is casework something that we could bid as an alternate,
It could be bid as an alternate.
or not worth it?
I'm just starting to get concerned that we have a lot of alternates.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
With the,
It makes it confusing.
the
And
case,
less attractive,
Yeah,
maybe?
and less attractive.
is the
Okay.
casework just classrooms, or is that
It's
offices?
it's
other
everywhere, it's everywhere you have a counter and some wall cabinets, so it's faculty rooms, libraries, music. But, these are things that are rolled into the building and attached to the walls after they're done. So, it can come as the building's being finished, or it can come a little later. The one concern about it coming later is that it covers fin tube radiators in a lot of cases, so we don't have covers on the radiators. So if the casework's not going to come, then we're going to buy radiator covers that you aren't going to need in a few years, so we'd have to work that out.
Is there anything on this list that causes you real concern?
I think there's a number of good things. The one that was surprisingly good to us was reducing the height of the hipped roof. And we went to the trouble to render it both ways in the computer model. And actually, the angle of that roof and how you approach the building, you really almost don't notice it from a perspective point of view. In a straight-on elevation, I still think it looks better higher, but at that dollar value savings, I think it's worth doing lower.
So what do you think is in that number?
Well, one of the things, we did learn a lot with the bidders, and Triton in our office sat with them and we talked, what's expensive? Why did this cost so much? And we spent a few hours with each one. And one thing we did hear is that sloped roof assembly, in order to meet energy code and to make it super durable, which is what we wanted, it turned out to be an expensive assembly. So it is a roof over a floor. So it's sort of double construction, and the less we have of that, you get real savings. We just extend the flat roof beyond it, and it still works. But the standing seam metal roofing was called out, and that whole assembly, which we had already made less expensive once, if you remember in DD, was something everybody said was costly. So we thought it was a good target. We also saw masonry numbers just through the roof. We don't understand why brick got so expensive all of a sudden. But masonry was about 35% above estimate, and that's, like $500,000. So that was a kind of a stunner because we haven't seen that elsewhere. So that led us to look at this idea of the exterior insulation system on portions of the gym and cafeteria that are up high.
Could you talk about the heights and what you were thinking there as far as the?
Yeah, so we didn't give you an image of that, but as you may remember, on the gymnasium, so on the west elevation of the gymnasium on the 2nd Avenue side, we had a large format masonry that's textured up to about a 9-foot height. That would remain brick. This is the area from the 9 to 28 feet above it that we would propose to do the exterior insulation and finish system. So what you're going to look at eye level is going to be exactly the same. I actually think that the EFIS system, which is the acronym for it, will lessen the apparent mass of the building because we'll have a lighter color rather than a continuous brick wall. It's almost 7,000 square feet of area that we're turning from brick to EFIS, and we actually think that the savings proposed in there is a little bit modest. But frankly, I don't think anyone would notice the difference if it was built this way. You already have EFS on the project, up high on the main classroom wing, for exactly the same reason, to sort of lighten the appearance of the building. We can do some horizontal banding and some vertical banding in it to give it a texture, so it's not just a large blank surface. EFS systems had a bad reputation in the first generation, just to be clear, because people might mention this, and they caused a lot of leaking. This is not that product anymore. This is a second generation EFS. It's something called a water managed system. So it has sort of a porous backing product than it was 30 years ago when it caused all those problems.
So Rich, just so I understand, so the EFS part of the building
Yep.
that already exists would be kind of up here?
Yep, it's right there,
Yeah,
right?
okay,
And,
Kind of around the side.
around here.
Place to see it, yeah.
I mean, I think probably the,
It's like,
there's a couple things on there that we looked at: cafeteria windows up high, the clear story windows, and some low windows in the cafeteria. And I'd say pick one, but not both. I think if we take both sets of windows out of the cafeteria, it's a little too much.
yeah, it looks like just an
The,
institution.
and then I'd also say that the savings that we saw by removing the front porch were not as significant as we were hoping. And I think the sort of front porch balcony has a identity impact on the building. And I'm not sure, I think it's around 25,000 if I recall.
26.
It's not, I don't know that it's worth it at that number, because we have to put a canopy back and.
So that's not a net number.
Where, is this?
Yeah, it is a net
entrance
number.
canopy?
23.
It is a net
Entrance
number.
24?
So I want to get back to the EFS a second, because
Yeah.
I'm not convinced.
Yep.
I didn't really like it up high, but at least it's up high and less subject to damage. Isn't there another material we could use, like a cement fiber cement board, or something of that nature?
We could look into that, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just looked at EFS because we already had the EFS on the project.
Understood, and, I held my tongue before.
We never used it forever, and only recently have we found it to be acceptable, to be honest.
I understand, again, it's up high, it's not subject to impact, down low. Especially that low,
As low as 9 feet?
as low as 9 feet. Visually.
Well, and to be honest with you, on the edges, on the south and north, it will come to ground.
Oh, it
So-
would?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't think that's.
I don't
But that's
think-
at sloping areas that are not really trafficked, but that's how that would have to work, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the two architects on the board really like the idea.
Well,
But-
obviously, it wasn't our first choice either,
Understood,
but we're just trying to find things.
but if you could look at an alternative, like a fiber cement board, which I know is pretty competitive now.
First thing in the morning.
That'd be great.
And can I ask too, when you, some of the items you indicated that have the most cost savings, you put lots to change and coordinate in terms of degree of difficulty.
That was really sort of internal notes. I probably should have hidden that column,
Well, I'm just curious how, I mean, if you're willing to share, how do you define that?
but number of drawings things appear on.
Okay.
For example, one thing we definitely think is worth doing is taking the sloped roof off the atrium. It was kind of a nice idea, but, that probably affects 35 drawings and 7 spec sections to make that change. And we're just trying to also, we share your view that getting back out quickly is almost as important as making these changes. So, but we're prepared to do anything on that list. We just literally need to make decisions as a group soon.
And those kind of changes, if they are significant, how do any of these impact the LEED silver benchmark that we were?
They don't, we checked.
And then also.
There was a couple that were dicey, like the domestic water metering, but we spoke with Jordana, the consultant, and Sarah spoke with her this morning, and this affects no LEED points.
Okay. And then also, if there were any major changes to drawings, do they have to get reviewed by the state again?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
This is being recorded, right?
Sorry.
No
One last
comment.
question on the glass, the glass at the entry.
Yep, that was a shocker.
Yeah,
What did you have
Security.
there in the first place?
School guard, it's a laminated glass. It's not a ballistic glass, but it's got a, in terms of it doesn't stop a ballistic penetration, but it doesn't break away.
Is it a proprietary product? Or
It's
is it just-
intrusion resistant, so even if it's penetrated, it takes a long time to break the glass away to get through it. So it is a significant delayer in the case of a bad actor.
And is that an integrated system with the framing?
No, it's just glass only because it doesn't require special framing. But we were surprised at the premium of it. There is kind of a bunch of it. It's at the main entrance, security vestibule, and the rear cafeteria entrance. But
Is it just the inner layer product? Like, is it, I mean,
No,
when you
it's-
call it School Guard, is that a proprietary product?
School Guard's a proprietary name for laminated intrusion-resistant security glass. There's other manufacturers of it. That's just the most common name of it.
Sounds like a structural inner layer.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm, for one, I'm not in favor of this. I think schools are struggling to increase their resistance to.
These are the
To
two
threat.
entrances
Yeah.
which visitors would approach.
Right. They
That's
wanna
why
keep
it's
that.
there.
I'm just
I
trying to
mean,
understand what it was.
it's kind of frustrating because, you know, there hasn't been a school shooting incident that went through the front door since Sandy Hook.
Right.
So you feel like you're protecting something that's already, you know, but still, I think we have to do it.
But I mean, I think the other thing it does is it provides glass in a location where you want glass.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
so I
mean,
think
yeah,
that-
the
that-
alternative is to
right.
put, you know,
Right.
block,
I know.
but I don't think that's the
Yeah,
m-
that's not the
image we want to
solution
portray.
Right. Russ, can we go back to the main entrance porch? Just to, I think there was a question about it, because 23 is main entrance porch balcony, 24 is entrance canopy. The proposal is to you're suggesting that's maybe one not worth?
I don't think
23.
at 23, the main entrance porch is worth removing. The
From
other
the
two
list.
canopies, I would say, let's take them away. They were at the other two stairwells on the south and north side of the building, on the east side. You know, they're just not that heavily traveled. These are canopies that cover the swing of the door when open. The one on the gym, in our call with administrators, she said, keep that one, that makes sense. That's a more prime entrance. It's not required by code any longer. And again, we were sort of surprised at the cost of those little tiny canopies.
Is there still a canopy at the cafeteria side?
That's a
Like,
full porch
that's a
there,
full
and
walk-
and
that's
that's
still
still there,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I know that was an important space.
So
for
then,
this.
so
Yeah,
you
that's a
would,
transitional space. That's
Okay,
pretty
that's
important.
there.
so you would suggest taking 23, the main entrance porch, off the list?
I don't think it's worth the change in appearance to the overall building.
Okay, and based on the discussion about the glass, is it fair to say that the board would want to take that one off
Yeah.
the table
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, we want to take that one off.
So security glass remains in? Okay.
The aluminum screen around the mechanical units at the southwest side of basement, that's just a visual screening?
It is.
I'm sorry, it's number 1D6.
Yeah, we have to put something, that's a net savings. We have to put an edge protection back. So there will be something there, but it won't be visual screening.
Is it on the roof?
It is.
Okay, I was trying to picture
It's on the
where it
roof.
was.
We have a
Is it
bunch of
on-
mechanical units on the low portion of the roof that's over just the mechanical room
Yeah.
on that far corner of the building. And we thought it would be a good idea to screen it. That's another thing that we found out from the bidders, that screen was very expensive. It is something could be added later,
Is it
Is
just
it
the-
visible from the ground?
Second Avenue.
yeah.
Yeah.
What would the new screen be? You said there would still be a screen?
We're gonna put something up like a pipe railing. What's required by code, because the units are so close to the edge of the roof, over.
Isn't there 23 feet height on that?
I'm
Is
sorry.
that more than 23 feet?
I don't know. We'll double check. I understand what you're saying. Maybe we
That
don't.
may be New York City. That's different there, but check that. I think it's 23 feet or over.
Okay.
But in any case, it's really more of an aesthetic issue because those units are facing Second Avenue.
Yeah, it did nothing to kill the noise. It's purely visual screening. And they're not very noisy units,
And
by
that's
the way.
something we could potentially,
What
Not very
noise?
Thanks for qualifying that.
that's something
Maybe somebody on
It's
Second
not
Avenue
acoustic
watched it.
screening, it's visual
we could
screening.
even potentially supplement that screening after the fact.
Yeah, it goes on at the end.
So I want to make sure I understand the cafeteria window question, because I agree
Yep,
with
that's
you
what I was
that we
gonna
should
go
not get
next.
rid of both of them. But the bigger number
This is
seems to be,
31 and
line
32.
31,
Yep.
seems to be the higher windows, is that correct?
It is, because
Okay.
that also impacts structural steel, because we've got some sort of fussy steel work to make those little windows fit in. So, again, this is something you find out from the bidders, once everything's all detailed and done, that feature costs more than was anticipated.
So, that was where you were saying kind of pick one, right? And it seems like the logical one to pick, both like for quality of life in the cafeteria and,
Yeah, I mean, the
Cost
high
would be the
windows are,
highest
the high windows are expensive for a number of reasons. Also, keep in mind, that's an auditorium. So all those windows have
Need black.
motorized shades on them. So you can black them out when you use the auditorium, because you can't operate shades way up there. So it had a lot to it. We thought it was nice. Like a lot of this project, most of us thought it was affordable, or close to affordable, until
Until it wasn't.
the bids opened. And
yeah, well, I mean, that seems to be one that
That
we
seems
should.
like an
31 we
easy
should
one.
I think
Yeah.
so too.
Yeah,
So
so-
we'll take
so eliminate
32
30.
off the list.
Take 32 off and leave
And then go
31.
ahead with 31.
Some of these things I'm not sure make a lot of sense, but provide only base course in this bid package. So,
What item are you on, John?
I'm sorry.
29.
that's the paving, and
29.
this is sort of you're gonna incur that expense later anyway, but finished course of paving goes on dead last in a project. And our experience is that causes contractors to gamble a little bit on the price of asphalt in 2.5 years. And you're better off just buying it from a paver when you're 3 months away from needing it, rather than perhaps paying more if it's now, or getting a terrible job later.
Why does this sound like one of those things that 2.5 years later you've forgotten you've done?
Well,
And you go, where's the paver? Oh, that's
Who's
no,
the guy that
paving's
didn't
out of the
finish the
You
contract.
forgot you eliminated it, and
yeah, I think that,
cobblestone road again.
I know you'll still be here, John, and you would not forget. That and the
Gonna make a
casework.
notebook of things not to
Well,
forget.
that's why we have Triton, right?
The
They're not gonna
casework,
forget
the
either.
acoustics, no, they need to be set aside, and it needs to be put in a placeholder in the budget, absolutely.
And these are decisions, as you said, that can be made at a later time, and also in light of contingencies being used or not used.
That's right, it's not a huge amount of money, and a $3.7 million contingency is a lot. But you want to see these projects a little bit further underway before you even think about using that money.
That's all in construction contingency, right?
Construction contingency, yep.
Can you talk about 30 for a minute? You're saying no curbs, no concrete, no masonry curbs on the roof.
This is a construction technique, Jess. Everyone felt it would be better at the back of the mansard roof. We have a vertical wall, and they thought, well, let's put some block at the bottom of that vertical wall for the flashing on. It's a nice idea. Well, parapets are made in steel studs all the time, so we're just going to carry steel studs down to the deck and waterproof it up to 2 feet.
Don't like it. I want that thing to be sitting above the roof. The steel studs should be sitting above the roof.
It
I
just
agree
brought a
with you.
masonry trade up to the roof for
It does.
2 courses, a block all the way around, and we don't see a waterproofing or a structural reason that it has to be there. We do agree it's better.
So what's the roof, is there a concrete roof deck?
No,
Okay, so
steel roof deck.
steel roof deck with what on top? Plywood?
I think there's a protection board insulation protection board membrane roof.
Okay. So the metal studs are going down to the metal roof.
They're gonna screw to the deck.
I don't like it.
I'm sorry, are you saying I do or don't?
I don't like it. I know, I understand, here's what he's saying, I get it. I don't disagree that that's cost something, but, you know, it requires, the metal studs will deteriorate quickly if they're
Wet,
wet.
yeah, and they'll be wet.
And at some point in time, they'll get wet, because that flashing is going to fail sometime down the road. And Jess is nodding her head. She's-
I agree with you. I mean, that's why I was asking the question. I didn't like the idea of stud, without, I like the idea of curbs, I guess. I'll put it that way.
I get your point, but I think that it's a short-term savings to buy a long-term problem.
I mean, we're doing roof and masonry replacement on the middle school, high school. right
100
now.
years later,
But-
almost 100
But
years
that's
later.
masonry.
The middle school,
Like,
not
this is
100
metal
years later.
studs, like, how much,
We're just trying to find
Right.
I
potential
understand, no,
savings.
I know,
it's
I
a
agree.
legitimate thing to look at.
That's all we're saying
So
too.
we should take it off the
We
list.
should take 30 off the
I-
list.
It didn't save as much as we were hoping, actually.
I don't like it,
I would like to take it off the list.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'll defer
We'll
to the
lean on to the
architects.
architects.
Okay. Other clarifications, questions?
Can we give them go-ahead on these things?
I'm hoping someone's taking notes and will scan that to us tomorrow
Yes.
morning.
Can I just go back to double check want to make sure that I capture this correctly. The furnishings casework, were we okay leaving that on the list, understanding that we're just,
My
So you-
understanding is that whole first section is just deferred.
deferred?
Yeah.
Still will have.
Mostly, yes. It's
Okay.
just, it's a way of
Yeah.
lowering the amount of money that we add up on bid day, so you can get going, see what all the other bids are, and see how the contingency goes, and figure out a way at that point, because we'll need everything.
Given that it's one of the last things to go in.
That's right.
So we're okay with that?
Kevin,
Keep
That
it.
makes sense to me.
this is something that, is the casework something that, because we're not going to open a school without casework. So, you know, it's pushing the, what is it, stupid term everybody uses?
Kicking the can down the road.
To a certain extent, but do you see this as something that we can reduce the cost 10, 15% buying a state contract and having it installed separately?
It is entirely possible. We would have to investigate it further. But I also do agree with Russ. I think this is I think as you move farther down the line and you realize that you have some cost savings perhaps in the general construction contingencies, we'll be able to realize this again. I think this is just right now a way of making sure that we have a project that is awardable the next time we go through the bid process, and then we'll add some of these things in later.
So it will be Triton's responsibility to track this and make sure that at some point down the road you say, oh, by the way, we have to buy the casework.
Absolutely. We'll time that out, just like we will your furniture,
And coordinate that
and
work.
coordinate that so that it's on the project at the appropriate time to do the installs, to stay with the rest of the project timeline, yeah.
Yeah, because you're gonna have
Yep.
electrical going into it, plumbing going into it, all sorts of things that have to be.
Whatever the board decides to do and however you decide to do it, we will be there to manage it for you. So
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're.
if that's a
not keeping-
concern of yours, don't be concerned.
We're
We'll
not
be there
finding a
for
way
you.
to delay the project and.
No, it's not that so much, is it, I think it's easy to convince yourself that we need to get the immediate price down, or it's really the total price you have to be concerned about. And if this, by taking it out of the general construction contract and giving it to another, awarding it separately, we think we can save money, then it's worth doing. But if we're gonna do this and it's gonna end up costing more down the road, then that would be kind of foolish.
Yeah, so the only real difference is just responsibility of coordination. So you like to give the general contractor that responsibility. let him handle all the details and work all those things out, so that if something happens, it's on him to resolve.
That's you, that's what I'm saying.
But that's, it would become our responsibility, and we will do that for you. And
Okay.
it wouldn't be the first time.
We often bid casework as a separate crime.
No, I understand that, and I think there's benefits to doing that. If we think it's gonna be less expensive in the long run, it's worth doing. But if it's, 2 years down the road, someone says, oh, that price of casework, boy, the Chinese casework is no longer there, so, we're paying 10% more.
Right. Well, I'm hoping that as we go down the road, that we're able to realize the full project as we planned. You may not. So there might be some considerations on downsizing some of it anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
I
but-
apologize for using the word Chinese casework.
yeah, But,
Okay, so we're keeping that on the list then, is my understanding of that. The other, we agreed that changing the roof line stays on as well, not a major thing there. The exterior of the gym, number 10, that's one we wanted more information
I
before
think we
agreeing
need
with
more.
that one.
We would like to see a
Okay.
different option for that.
So that one would need follow-up.
And we can make a commitment to turn that around quickly,
Quickly,
right?
yeah.
Okay, I think we, as a board, need to understand that that's
Yeah.
important, right? So
Yeah.
if we're asking for more information at this point,
So
that we can.
literally
extra-
tomorrow,
Okay.
basically.
And that
Russ
would
said.
be a decision made by our bond steering folks, right? We would-
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as we can get the way into the bond steering subcommittee, board members, that should be fine.
Yeah.
So everything else I've got kind of as yeses or alternates. Security glazing is coming off the list.
Correct.
Main entrance porch and balcony coming off the list.
Mhm.
Sidewalks, public streets, we had taken that off separately, as well as, that's 27. Also, I skipped it, but I'll just mention 17 toilet rooms. We had, in our conversation earlier, we're taking that off the list as well.
Oh, you are?
Um,
Well,
Yeah.
at that point, that number is only lowering the height of the tile in the multiple stall toilet rooms. That's not taking the tile off the concrete block, because you already said no to that.
Right,
So
right.
we're gonna leave 5 in, or we're gonna leave 17 in, is what you're saying.
I don't think you need full height tile in an elementary school.
I agree.
It's
So,
nice,
yes,
but
on that
I don't think you need it in the
That
multiple
stays.
stall toilet rooms.
Okay.
Agreed.
That's right.
Is that gonna be the top of the toilet stall?
Pretty much, yeah. It's taking away 4 feet of tile, though, full
Yeah, it's like
perimeter.
half of it.
But you're meaning saying top of the toilet stall because the
It's
partitions
like
are
from
only 5
here,
feet
it's
tall
like from
anyway?
here and up
yeah.
will be
So that
sheetrock,
seems- yeah.
rather than
Sheetrock.
ceramic
That's-
tile,
That's, what- yes,
painted.
Well, it says it's concrete block
Well,
instead of tile.
yeah, that's what caught me.
We didn't have time to change that, Jess,
Oh,
but in our
Okay.
earlier call with administrators, Cheryl told us, no exposed concrete block, so we didn't price that.
Oh.
So all we priced was the multiple stall toilet rooms.
So that's
So
sheetrock.
there will be
Okay.
ceramic
We're on
tile
the same page,
over the concrete block.
thank you.
Good you brought it up.
You don't have to see it.
Exactly. Okay, and then we're taking
and then
27,
sheetrock above.
like I said, that we talked about
Of a
that in the prior
concrete block
conversation.
above.
Right. 30
Oh.
roof
And
construction.
those are single stall toilet rooms only in the basement that have concrete block exposed.
Yeah.
It's only
No, I'm-
3 little toilet
I
rooms.
was just trying to understand if there was sheetrock or concrete block. Okay, got it.
It's a little bit of both in those rooms. The wet wall is cement
Is all
board.
cement.
and
Okay, thank you.
We're taking roof construction, number 30 off.
Mhm.
We're taking 32, exterior window.
I'm sorry,
Roof construction,
the
The
little.
curbs.
concrete
the
block.
curbs.
That's coming off the list. The windows below the sill in the cafeteria, 32 are coming off.
Okay, we're gonna leave
Everything
those
else
alone.
is staying as is. Can we just talk a little bit, the second page, I think a couple of 35 through 41 were Sarah's additions, or just today's additions? that we
Today's
didn't
additions,
discuss?
those came from the engineers, so yeah.
Okay,
Um,
so just a moment on those, and I don't know, John Condon, I don't know if you had any thoughts on these as well, because I know you. Okay. Okay. Okay, if you could just give us a quick rundown of those.
Well, there's a couple things, that we had some stone piers on the playground, we can use steel posts. That was at a gate to the playground. There was a little bit of sidewalk that was a nice idea, but I don't think is essential between the playground and the sort of, it's like a branch sidewalk. It's a shortcut from the playground to the parking lot. I don't know that you need that. You can add it later. It's not going to be that heavily trafficked. The pipe specs I would definitely take. I frankly thought that was already done. The domestic water sub-meters were a recommendation to improve tracking of energy efficiency, but again, it doesn't hurt a lead point. They wouldn't normally have them in a building. The hose bibs were something that the school recommended, hot water hose bibs. This is a change to just have cold water underneath the sinks. So this is just a more efficient way to get cold water only into those rooms for cleaning. The electrical feeders, the electrical engineer actually recommends this, that aluminum feeders are really more of an alloy these days. They're completely safe, and they use them all the time in public work. So that would be worth doing. And this last one snuck in after I last saw this list from our interior designer, which is really more of a deferment than it is an elimination, but which is the stage curtains, which can be purchased later.
Oh, those are all the stage curtains?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The aluminum feeders, does that change the conduit size? 'Cause
Uh,
generally, feeder sizes go up.
Uh,
So that's a net saving.
It's a shielded cable, actually, so it doesn't even go in conduit, and that's one of the savings.
I see.
It's like a giant BX cable. So
Okay. Well, Con Ed uses it all over the place. I don't know why we shouldn't.
our engineer believes, this was suggested before in DD and rejected. He brought it back up. He's completely fine with it. I trust if an electrical engineer wants to use them, they're generally very conservative people. I would say, take it.
Go for it. Like I said, Con Ed uses it everywhere.
Copper's super expensive, and that's what you're seeing.
Any other questions or concerns on these? Are we good to go with these as well?
Do you know with the theater equipment, is that any preparation work that needs to be done in order for that to be post-installed? Like, do we need pockets or tracks or things?
This is all pretty much surface-mounted
all
stuff
surface
inside the stage house. So we could work with Triton, make sure all the blocking's there, but it's all on the drawings right now. So we just really would be taking out the tracks and fabrics,
Okay.
not,
So that's more of a deferred, because we have to have curtains.
Definitely.
Right.
On the stage.
yeah, but you can buy it straight from a curtain guy.
Yeah.
No, I'm just making sure it would be ready to go if we
Right.
were to.
Yeah, well, that's something we get to do together. Yeah,
Great. John, anything? Questions?
When we get price on this stuff right now, you have pricing before the end of the.
So we're talking about all the casework. We're gonna reach out to a number of different vendors that we know,
Okay.
and we're gonna work together to try and get an actual cost on all the casework that we're talking about separating out of the contract, so that you have a sense of what the actual dollars are. We could probably do that also for all the other equipment, curtains, gymnasium equipment, pads, a whole different host of things, depending on how you wanna handle that. So we're gonna work together on that, and.
We'll get the actual numbers in hand, you can still go option to defer it, but at least you have the full picture.
Great.
Oh, the curtains.
Okay,
In the
so,
next month.
great. So the only outstanding thing on this list at this point is the side of the gym, the surface on the side of the BFS.
yeah, we'll try
Surface.
and give you some options, and we'll work on it right away,
Yeah.
because it's a lot of work to change, and we understand the concern.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
again for this work.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys.
Okay, so that brings us to 4.3, Assistant Superintendent's update on authentic learning.
Sure, just a couple quick updates. One is that Dr. Michael Reddig, he is our scheduling consultant. He will be returning to meet with our administrators again in 2 weeks. He met with us previously about a month ago. We began discussions about one of the strategic plan goals in authentic learning is look at our use of time in the district. So we had 2 separate meetings, one with the K-5 team and then also with the 6-12 team of administrators. We have some unique challenges The most obvious is that we have shared staff at the elementary level across 4 schools. And then, of course, at the middle school, high school, it's attached and we share staff. And then we also share a lot of space. So we had some very good discussions. And this is just all preliminary. It's not like we're gonna all of a sudden change schedules for kids next year. That's not the plan. It's really to kind of get some ideas, learn about different options and different scenarios from the expert. And really the person who's been writing books about it and helps many school districts internationally is Dr. Reddick. So we had some good discussions, and we'll continue that work in a couple weeks. We're looking forward to that. Also, our Authentic Learning Committee, Board Committee, will meet again on December 16th. And previously, we looked at the humanities, professional learning in the humanities. And this time around, we're going to preview John Sabalos, who's Director of Technology. He's going to present the board a tech profile in January. So he'll preview that work. And also, we'll spend a little time looking at innovation and STEAM professional development. And we'll have Dr. Callahan join us for that. So those are 2 highlights that will happen about a week and a half from now. And also on the agenda, as you'll see, is that we have the resignation for the purpose of retirement of 7 wonderful teachers. I'll just name them again: Nancy Baird, Laura Connors, Lori Cusick, Mary Ellen Garcia, Julie Lieberson, Maureen Morrissey, and Pat Sadlish. That's 7 teachers. And then also we had previously Carla Mattis. We approved her retirement as well. So we're going to honor them in June, but just so you can understand the impact they've had in this district, if you look all the years that they've worked combined, it's 188 years working with our children, which is huge. And a couple of them kind of go all the way back to 1984. So, well, at least one of them does. That's a while back if you think about it. So we're going to thank them again in June in the ceremony, and we just congratulate them on their retirement.
Thank you.
Sure.
4.4, Assistant Superintendent's update on the whole child.
Thank you. So I'll start with the update on the strategic plan and the whole child goal. Our wellness committee is meeting on a monthly basis. We're meeting again tomorrow to continue the discussion. Last month, we had Ms. Caruso come and share the Haas survey results with the committee. And tomorrow, we have Dr. Rivera, who's going to present on what some of the other school districts are doing in terms of like the wellness centers that they have in their schools. Our MTSS committees, the K-5 district and building teams, they were trained by Mr. Jim Wright, the consultant we've been using for the MTSS. That occurred a couple of weeks ago. We have the middle and high school teams being trained in the next couple of weeks. Let's see, we also had day 3 training of responsive classroom. That was a 4-day training that we had set up. So we had day 3 a couple of weeks ago, and the teachers were very engaged, and they're still very excited about it. So we're looking at how we're going to roll out the next cohort for the training. In terms of our PPS office, we had a SEPTA meeting. That was the first formal meeting that we held last Monday. A week from Monday, last Monday. It was a great, successful night. We have 2 new co-presidents, and Dr. Ribeiro, Mr. Lau, and I gave a overview of the PPS program, services, procedures, and different information for parents. So that was a great turnout. Our high school FOL students, for Thanksgiving, they had collected donations from various high school departments, and they created boxes of Thanksgiving in a Box drive, which was coordinated through the Huguenot Memorial Church, the Pelham Jewish Center, OLPH, St. Catherine's, Christ Church, and Pelham Community Church, and all the boxes were donated to the different families in need in Westchester. And lastly, the counseling department, our monthly career awareness series. We have another one coming up on Friday, and the topic is global engagement. This will be a panel discussion on global diplomacy, humanitarian, climate, cultural, and health topics. And it'll be led by Donna Sheriff from the U.S. Department of State. The panel includes Foreign Service Officer, language interpreter, civil service program officers, liaison to the United Nations, nuclear arms disarmament advisor, Doctors Without Borders, and climate change data experts. So we have a lot of exciting experts coming to talk to our students. So that should be a great turnout.
When did the students attend those sessions? Is that at lunch or is
It's 9 o'clock in the morning.
it? Okay, they all
Yeah.
go or anybody who's interested?
Anybody who's
I
interested.
got
To
you.
hold it right here, if I remember correctly. Yep,
All right, thank you.
very nice.
Did you see the article in the Journal News this morning?
Which one?
It was about mental health services in school districts.
You mean, I think it was yesterday's.
Was it yesterday? Maybe it
Yes,
was.
I made a copy of it, so I could share it with the wellness committee tomorrow, so
Oh,
we'll be
okay.
reading that.
It was
Yes.
interesting.
Yes, it was,
Just shows, I think we're heading in the right way.
definitely, definitely.
This brings us to Jim, Assistant Superintendent's update on finance and facilities.
Hi, thank you, and good evening. So a large part of what's been taking up our time has been with the discussion that just took place, capital project, working forward with meeting with the bond steering committee, as Jess spoke about as well. Next week, Facilities Committee will also be meeting. We'll review some of that. We'll review our facilities policies as well. That'll tie in with what Eileen's work with the Policy Committee as well. We're gonna send those agendas out later in the week. On the agenda tonight, we're catching up with our September and October treasurers' reports. We've got a settlement for a tax certiorari. Again, these are all reserved, so that's where we fund those from, and we do that as part of our end-of-year allocations. We have two recommended change orders right now for the Glover Field project. One is for a combo box, which is it's a utility box that's in the field, which will have some hookups. A small dollar amount, about $800, and the other was for, I'm sorry? Oh, okay. And the other was for the walkway from the bridge, which will be more of the most common pathway, hopefully, when this project is completed. We needed to get the angle to a level that would not require a railing so that it was ADA accessible. And with that, along the edge of that walkway, we included some rodent protection because there's some pretty big rodents living in the river there who like to dig at the river's edge and could undermine some parts of the of that area. So we want to make sure that's not undermined in any way.
TMI.
Thank you for doing
Yeah.
that.
And I don't know if the geese-off dogs will go near those fellas either. So.
Would you?
I wouldn't go near them either. We've got a budget transfer tonight. Some of it has to do with Swagit, which is part of our closed captioning and ADA accessibility for our meetings that we have here. Some time ago, the board approved a vendor to survey 314 Pelhamdale. That work was done. This contractor gave us a vendor name under one title, billed us under a different title. It's the same person, but we're not going to pay the bill because the board authorized it under one vendor name. So it's really just getting authorization from you to have that person, to pay them under the different business that they submitted the bill. Another generous donation, and a last donation we're expecting from the estate of Harry Hahn, which was well over $100,000, distinguished graduate of Pelham Memorial High School. So that was really great to see too. And internally, we're working hard with our budget instructions and our multi-year financial planning, and eager to share that with the board as well, because that's part of what we want to do as we go to the budget cycle.
Could you, maybe I missed it, could you also highlight the nurse supervisor? Did you mention that?
Oh, I didn't, and thank you. This evening, there is an item for a side letter with the CSEA for a nurse coordinator stipend. And what this is, and this is through Julia Chung's office, is to have a kind of a head person with the nurses to make sure they're kind of that lead person assigned to stay on task with policies and procedures, state mandates, common policies and procedures district-wide. So we've worked with the CSEA union to create this stipend, and we've got this before the board. You'll see what the stipend is. It's prorated for this year, and then it's an annual stipend reappointment every year. And we think this really better looks after the health and welfare of our students.
We had so much to say.
Lots of comments, I knew there'd be lots of comments on this.
That's one of our existing
existing nurses will take on.
Exactly, it's an
additional
existing
employees.
position, with existing roles and responsibilities. It includes about 4 days over the summer as well, probably 2 days at the beginning of the summer, and 2 days certainly leading up to the summer, or leading up to the new school year, so that everything is pointed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Is there a person in
That
mind?
was my question.
Okay.
Is there a person in mind for this, or?
That would be in Dr. Chung's office, but I don't know if she's, if it's,
Open it up.
Be
Yeah.
posted.
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
it's an application.
Yep.
And this, what I was gonna say, this was an offshoot of many of our discussions at the policy committee level last year. It seemed, we made a number of apparent too, that
I
just
think
the
so, as we look at the
continued
wellness
coordination
policies.
of,
Yeah.
you know,
I think it's a good idea.
how we handle
Medication
things
ones,
and the
yeah.
medication would be helpful, that it's a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
It just reminded me too, what we did is we used BOCES, and we did do we asked for a survey of other school districts. Some school districts have a full-time position who does it, some of the larger school districts. A lot of districts we found take the approach that we're recommending this evening, where you have a stipended position for an existing employee.
And I would add, I think this is coming at a really great time too, because as the board's aware, we've had a number of nurse retirements and vacancies over the last couple years, and upcoming, we had a nurse retirement, so we're just posted today to fill, I believe it's a Siwanoy nurse that will be retiring
In March, right?
in March. So we got a lot of transition going on in our medical staff, and it's obviously an incredibly important area. And at the same time, policy committee has been actively working on making sure all of our medical policies are up to snuff. So I think it's just perfect time for transition, to put one person with medical expertise specifically on this to roll out the new policies, provide consistent care, and training to our new nurses too. That's another part of the job. Should be tasked with mentoring and training all new staff.
It does come up quite a bit in the policy committee as we go through them. It's like, how exactly will this play out, and who will be doing this with the nurses? And it's
Right.
not totally clear right now
Right.
how that happens. So
that's
I think that
exactly-
this is a great position for
Yeah.
that.
Not to mention the fact Jean and Julia have such a big umbrella
Right.
of tasks to oversee, nurse being one of them, so
Yeah, so,
this helps lessen
yeah,
your
we're
load.
very happy to have this one coming on.
Okay. So section 5, policy monitoring and governance, 5.1 is policy 5661. It's the third reading of the wellness policy. Eileen?
Yeah, nothing new, obviously, for the third reading. If anybody has any questions or needs a refresher, I'm happy to provide, but I assume you've all internalized 5661
Both last year and this year.
Yeah. repeatedly. Okay.
Okay, so,
Oh, sorry.
did you have a question?
Are you asking for action on it tonight?
Yes.
Yeah,
Because it's
okay.
the third reading, yeah.
We
So-
can move ahead to
Yeah.
So
approve it.
do
yeah.
I have a motion on policy 5661, the wellness policy?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Another one in the bag. Okay,
Just
5.2 is policy 5620, inventories and accounting of fixed assets. This is the first reading.
Right, so this policy is just an update from the last time we approved it, which was adopted in 2012. There were quite a lot of changes to this one, but they were not really substantive. More elaborations on the definitions of fixed assets, and also how, there's been some additions in how we record them and keep track, and also procedures around the disposal of assets required, that we acquired by federal grant. There were a lot more instructions there. But nothing that really changed the policy specifically.
Okay.
This one was reviewed by the
By
policy
Jen.
committee, obviously, but
Yeah.
was this one that went, no, it's just through the business office
Yeah,
that
Not
reviewed,
through audit.
right,
Yeah.
no
Not
committee
through
on
audit, that's
Jen's
what I was
side.
trying to think of, yeah.
No,
not audit.
Where did the changes come from? Were they like based on another?
the lawyers actually
Lawyers did that.
provided all of them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for this one, the biggest feedback we've been hearing is on items, equipment acquired through federal
Right.
grants. It's just something where the state auditors have been very active with all school districts looking
Okay.
at this, and it's something where we're hearing internally from our groups, tighten it up and put it in writing.
Okay.
So
This is something they advised us.
it's a recommendation that we're hearing from all of our counterparts and from our legal folks.
Okay.
Okay, and then 5.3 policy 7440, student voter registration and pre-registration, the first reading of a new policy, right?
Right, this is a brand-new policy that we received, and the policy committee accepted the language as it was given to us. It encourages the district to promote student voter registration and pre-registration. It doesn't specify how to do that, although it does say that it cannot be a course requirement or a requirement in any way. But they encourage us to integrate that into something, class, curriculum,
Is
something
this a
like that.
required policy? Or is it-
Yes, it's a new required
It's a new, yeah.
policy.
It's a required policy to encourage, to offer opportunities to encourage students to pre-register to vote.
Yeah.
Or
Ahead of-
register,
or
and
to
register,
register,
yeah,
okay.
if they're old enough, they can register.
And it's a really much younger, I think, than people may have thought of it. A person who is at least 16 years of age and who
That's what I was
otherwise
thinking,
qualified, and is otherwise qualified to register, may pre-register to vote, and then will automatically be registered to vote upon reaching age of eligibility. So this is something Dr. Thompson, through, the humanities, under Dr. Garcia's oversight, was already very much on top of.
There are student groups that do voter registration drives as well, too.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they do,
Mhm.
especially during budget season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
That's all I had for the policy. Oh, you didn't mean me. You
Well,
meant-
just in general, that does include you.
I just wanted to say one other thing about the policy committee work in general, that as we get new policies coming to us to review, we've been making the language consistent around how we refer to students. In some policies, they're he, she, some policy it's child, sometimes it's student. So going forward, we'll be using student and trying to make that consistent. And then there are some other, sometimes the language is parents, sometimes it's guardians, sometimes it's persons in parental relation, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we are going forward with parents/persons in parental relation. There we are.
We got into that with like the medications and things like that,
Yes,
right?
a perfect
Yeah.
example.
Right.
Sounds like a sticky wicket.
It's a lot of editing. And Leah really was the thought leader there, so thank you for that.
We knew she was.
Thanks.
We knew she was.
It's been an
Yeah.
outstanding addition to the
Yes,
policy committee.
We're so lucky.
So you're just making that amendment as you are reviewing policy?
Exactly, we're not going
gonna go
back,
and look.
no.
Yeah.
But
I
as we
gotcha.
go forward, and we have a lot of policies, so we will slowly get to all of them.
Especially when we get to the code of conduct.
Yes.
That'll be a good 50,
So
60
fun.
pages.
That'll be
Like
the back half of the year.
Yeah, a year-end note, that
Right.
in the following
Yes.
year, we have to continue to make those
Yeah.
changes. Very good. Okay, section 6, financial reports and motions. I'd like to take a consent agenda for 6.1 through 6.5. Do I have a motion?
Second?
Any questions or comments? These are the budget transfers and treasurer's report and tax cert and the vendor name change. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, 6.6 through 6.8, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? These relate to the bond. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and 6.9, and 6.10 I'll take as a consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? 6.11 I'll take on its own. It's a motion to accept a donation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so, there are two here. I always have trouble reading this.
The first is a
Like,
donation.
is it my
Starts
glasses or
right-
not? Yeah, okay.
Here.
We hereby accept the monetary donation of $1,700 to support the purchase of library quality books for the use of a diversity book bag project at Colonial Elementary School, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, Colonial Elementary School PTA. This is very exciting in terms of the diversity work that we've
Yes.
been talking about and what we've been talking about at PTA Council for the last year. And then also, we do hereby accept the monetary donation of $46,839.37, representing the final distribution from the estate of Harry G. Hone for the Pelham Memorial High School, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the estate of Harry G, Hilton. What was the total over the whole?
I'll have to get it for the board. It ended up,
You
I
said it was
think,
around 100,000?
north of $100,000.
Wow.
Wow.
Don't forget us in your wills.
Very
My dad's
generous.
an estate planner. Yeah, exactly.
Do we have an endowment?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, section 7, I'll take as a consent 7.1 through 7.4. These are the superintendent's personnel recommendations. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Anything you guys want to add?
Besides the retirements, we have leave replacements and the appointment of, some modifications to a couple of appointments. One, ENL, we have an increase in ENL services need there, and also with reading services.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 8, People Personnel Services, Schedule D. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, this brings us to section 9, new business. Does anybody have any new business? Okay, so if nobody else has new business, I thought this would be a good time to bring up the discussion about the request to rename Glover Field. As you know, we've had many work sessions this fall that have taken up our time, so I think we had all hoped to be able to address this sooner, but our meetings ran late and we didn't want to shortchange this. But nevertheless, this is a request that I think we could all agree we have not taken lightly, and it's something that last year's board and this year's board have considered a great deal. And so I want to thank everybody, those who may be watching or who have put in the request, and all of you guys for your patience, because this has taken some time. So we received a lot of feedback. We received feedback via emails. We had people come to our meetings and speak very eloquently. I was especially impressed with all the high school students who came, because it takes a lot of courage to attend our meetings and to get up and to speak up at our meetings. We've had board level discussions. We had this discussion at our fields committee level. Many of us have had community members share their feedback with us on the side, have come up to us when they've seen us in town. And I think what was apparent is that there are many people who came forward in great support of the idea to rename the Glover Turf Field in honor of Anthony Synergia Jr. And then there are many who felt that there are other options that we could be considering. And so I've spent some time reflecting on the feedback and trying to pull all this together to help us push this along a little bit. And the one thing that was absolutely crystal clear, I've gone back through emails and really reflected on all these conversations. There's no doubt that the board and the community would like to ensure that Anthony Synergia's life and legacy is commemorated at Glover Field. There was not a person who came out against that. And then, of course, these discussions then reminded, Sue and I were on the board 2 years ago when we first received a request to find a way to honor Anthony Synergia Jr. at Glover Field. And the field renaming was something that was considered at the time, and the board, with input from the family, decided at that point to place the 44 that many of you may have seen on the turf field. That was his number, to place it there on the field in his honor and to pay tribute to his life in that way. And so, but one thing that happened is that we were in such a rush to get that 44 on the field that, in reflecting on it, as a board, we just got it there in time for homecoming, but we didn't follow it up with anything to kind of really complete the work or the decision that was made around that. I had children in the football program, and they came home with the T-shirts that fall, like with his number on, on the back of their shirts. But at the board level, we didn't really do anything to really put an exclamation point on that decision, which was well thought out. So these discussions have sort of left me feeling, and I don't know if Sue would agree, that the business, maybe was left unfinished, that our decision that was made a couple years ago is left unfinished. So one plan that we could consider, and I'd like to gather your feedback, would be to do I guess a plan would be a three-pronged plan in my mind, to pass a formal resolution at a board meeting, an upcoming board meeting, to commemorate the decision that was made to put the 44 on the field. All important things we put into a formal resolution, and that was not something that was done. And I'm not saying any of this to say that we didn't do our job. It just feels like it just feels unfinished business. And additionally, it would be ideal to place a plaque near the field, or at the field, to commemorate the 44, to explain everything that, went into Anthony's life and the impact that he had on students and the continuing legacy that he has within our community. There are people who have come up to us in discussions who don't know what the 44 is because they're not involved with the football program or they weren't keyed into this discussion. They've arrived to town since that 44 was placed, and so we made it an important decision. I would hate to think that visitors for years to come would come to the field and not know what that 44 was and why he was important to our town. And then additionally, another idea we could consider would be to have a ceremony at the field, which we didn't get to do, to officially recognize the 44 where it's placed and the plaque. And perhaps, when the complex is complete, given that the field work will hopefully wrap up at some point in the spring. So I fully recognize that this idea that we're tossing out is something that falls short of what many people may have hoped would be the outcome here. Given all the feedback we received, though, it seems that this idea may be the best way to accomplish what it feels like everybody's aiming to accomplish, which is really to memorialize an incredible person who had a lasting impact in our community, and we want to continue to have a lasting impact in our community. So I just wanted to take this time at the end of the meeting, I know it's been a long meeting, but just to kind of hear your thoughts on that and see what you guys are thinking at this point.
Yeah, I think you summarized it really well. I mean, this has been a conversation that's been going on for longer than the official request from the community that a lot of people are aware of, to rename Glover Field. So it did start, many months before that, with the kind of quick discussion about a way to permanently memorialize his number on the field. And I couldn't agree with you more that there's a lot of unfinished business there. And I think a proclamation, particularly, really laying out all of the reasons that many of the students and other community members told us, were important to them, about his legacy, is an important way to make sure that is permanently, not only permanently in the field as 44, but permanently there to explain why, And so I totally agree that we missed, that opportunity, and I think it was timing. And we did a small ceremony at homecoming during the football game with the family, but it wasn't that kind of bigger ceremony that you're talking about, with that kind of plaque unveiling and that permanent piece there.
Yeah, the
So
football
I think
program certainly got to celebrate it, but it feels like on our
right.
level, we didn't make it that official. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Well, I certainly agree with your sentiment about finding a proper way to honor Anthony. And I think what you've laid out is very sensible. I didn't realize you were going to talk about a plaque ceremony, but I think that's an integral part of that. It's a key part of that because it kind of puts the exclamation point on, as you said. So I very much in favor of the things that you're suggesting there. Community members come to the board on occasion with very strong feelings about an issue, one way or the other. But I think it's up to the board to take the long view, step back, and it's not always decisions that people like. But I think it's our responsibility to do that. And so I think what you've outlined is really an excellent plan. I think a plaque that outlines his contributions, not only just to the community, but to the nation, really, with how he and his family, created such a viral event with the, what was it called? The Ice Bucket Challenge, yeah. I mean, every time you turn around, you see another celebrity doing it. So it's too bad we couldn't have kept it going. But I think your suggestions are right on target. And I'm hoping that we can turn this into a really good, positive celebration.
just had an idea that is maybe something that we could talk about a little bit, as far as drafting a resolution that's
Mhm.
worked out for, in other venues in the district in the past. So as long as there are some students still in the high school who knew him personally, that maybe they could be called upon to help with some of the language. And that might broaden the community aspect of this, at the same time.
Certainly thought that we'd like the family to weigh in on the language of the plaque in particular.
Right. Because I know that the students had felt very strongly about it, and they may have some specifics that, I mean, it's just something to think about, that maybe getting some participation would be welcome.
Certainly at the same time.
I think it's a great way to commemorate Anthony, is what you've outlined here. I mean, as someone who's new to town and didn't really know the football story, you know, I heard little bits about it from my daughter coming home from school and what she learned. And then I met the Synergias down the street from me. But, you know, it's like, I think it's really important to build upon our community and to share that for the generations that come. And I think making sure people know what that number is and what it means and how the community came together and how we grow, I think is really important. So I think it's great that we step back and make sure we're sharing the information too and making this as big as it should be.
I agree with all of that.
So when will we expect to see the next steps here?
So we can talk a little bit more about that and maybe have you weigh in here. I thought that, I mean, in an ideal world, I mean, this is something that we have been talking about, as I said, for a long time. So in an ideal world, I think it would be nice before our next meeting to be able to pull together a resolution, give you time to take a look at it, and the plaque wording, and then once the board's had a chance to look at it, give the family some sufficient time, or maybe students, to weigh in. And it would be a nice way to end the year, I think, to
Would it be possible to pass a resolution and, you know, put a lot of the formal pieces in place and then leave the exact wording to be determined?
I don't see why not. I know.
You know, I mean, if we need a little bit more time on the exact
Yeah.
wording of the plaque
For the wording and the design.
and the design,
I
you
mean,
know, I
it's-
mean, maybe it could be, but we could pass the proclamation and the resolution and everything else.
I
The
don't
size,
think,
whether there's an image on the plaque, there's a lot of
Yeah,
Yeah.
consideration.
because I think that, that'll be important in the way that it looks and.
I was thinking back to what happened with the Salamini plaque and the resolution, and that it was all together, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I imagine we could probably put in it that we were going to have vote on the proposal of having a plaque, but wording to be voted on at a future date, you know.
So which reminds me, in the New Rochelle School District headquarters, I think they're probably still there, but on the top floor where the meeting rooms are and the superintendent's offices, there's a series of plaques down the corridor of notable alumni from New Rochelle High School, which cover a whole range of people, mostly athletes, and many others too. And every one of those has sort of a bronze head, if I remember correctly. But then a really nice story about what that person meant to the school district. So I don't, we don't have that opportunity here, but still, it's a very effective display and a very effective sort of history lesson right in the school district offices. I'm quite sure they're still there, but they were there so many years ago.
I think we're hoping to do something somewhat similar at Glover. I know John and Jim have, been, especially with the construction projects going on, they're getting an assessment of everything that's down at that field. And we've had some, the thought of bringing a lot of the memorials to one spot.
Yes.
On the property, kind of for that same reason, because people, some of the things are behind the bleachers, they're up on the hill, but if we could bring them all and have that historical place, I think that would be nice, and I think this would certainly be a great addition to something like that too.
And a great way to, hopefully wrap up the field work related to the bond over there as well.
Field work, yes.
Yes.
To have it
Never ending.
have it be finalized in time to, you know, the field's looking great over there in that construction site. Yeah, I bet.
But it's gonna be,
I
what,
bet.
60 next week?
Oh, gosh.
I digress.
Any other thoughts, or, so that's something that we'll work on, we'll see what we can pull together before the next meeting, I think that would be ideal if we could at least, pass the resolution. So I'll be in touch with you guys, but thank you for your feedback
Thank you.
and all the time you guys have already spent
Thank you.
on this. It was, as I said, something that we've tried to consider and,
Well, thank you for pulling all of that together and doing all the research.
thank you. Okay, so 10, communications and comments from the public. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I guess I did that in reverse. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Nice.
Not bad, 10 o'clock.
You
given the
adjourn.
bar.